Hey everyone, it's Dr. Shiloh. Welcome back. I'm here with
Dr. Scott. Hey folks, we are back after a short break with tons of news.
Yes.
A lot of exciting stuff.
So thank you for holding out on our hiatus for July.
Yeah.
Hope everyone's having a bitchin' summer. It is so hot right now.
I know.
We're recording in a studio with our sound guy, Justin, because we did an interview earlier today. But we are melting. And I told Scott, I'm like, I know we're always bitching about weather or whatever. And we're so lucky where we're at.
We are. But also, people forget that Los Angeles area of Southern California is so huge. There's a wide variety in climates, and right now we're over in a part that is sort of in the Pasadena area, and the air is just still.
Yeah,
it's just hot and still.
It's hot and still, and
so I'm sweating.
We're smelling it. It's good. Do you guys smell it?
Gross.
No. So it's been 2 weeks now since the True Crime Podcast Festival in Chicago, which was wildly successful. We had our live show. Well, I'm going to say live in air quotes, live for a live audience that we did with the Getting Off podcast, and the audio for that was not quite captured well. So what we did is we actually have re-recorded that with Jessa and Nick of Getting Off. And so we are going to get that out to you because we did the Mary Kay Letourneau case. And so many of you have been asking us to do female sex offender topics that, of course, we're going to put that out. So,
and it was a blast.
It was so much fun.
I have to go back and say I really am almost speechless, and that's saying a lot for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know about the history of. I knew this was going to be the first annual True Crime Podcast Festival, inspired by Podcasters Row at CrimeCon. So we've been in contact with with Lainey and Lisa for 8-9 months, preparing for this. Not really knowing what was going to happen, and they knocked it out of the park.
It was great.
I thought, and I don't even want to say like for a first effort because that sounds diminishing, and I don't mean to diminish it at all. It was fantastic. It was a great venue where we were in a contained area where you didn't need to leave. There were restaurants,
great
bars,
part of the city,
beautiful part of the city. You do want to leave the hotel though because Chicago is beautiful, and we got literally the best weather probably possible in summer at all.
Yes,
but the presenters and the other podcasters were just amazing. You just felt like family.
Yeah,
everybody was so friendly and cool.
It was so neat. I thought it was so cool just to sit and talk with people, and I'm like, I listen to your voice when I'm in the car, and here we are chatting. And that's just an odd, surreal experience.
It is.
In and of itself.
It's really weird.
We were just as much fans being there and attending as we were being, part of the event itself. But I thought the topics for the panels were really great, talking about inclusivity and ethics and God, everyone just really seemed to enjoy themselves. I'm sure if you didn't go, you saw it all over social media, what just a success it was.
Yeah, so. I can only imagine that they're planning for it to be a bigger event next year because there were, I had friends that were emailing me at the last minute trying to get tickets, and I kept having to tell people, I think it's sold out. I don't think you can get in.
Right.
But then we also had this phenomenal opportunity to do the panel with Nick and Jess. I know you touched on that. I'm huge fans of the Getting Off podcast. As I have said here before, this was our first chance to meet in person. It was, for one thing, what I don't know if it's necessarily going to come across in our collaboration. We just had a blast with them earlier today recording, but I wish that everybody could have been there in the audience when we were doing this. I've never felt so professionally respected as far as the way information was flowing between the four of us. I just thought it was a great opportunity to really present this somewhat lurid case, and really, I think we gave a really profound three-dimensional perspective on some very complex issues, including gender roles and sexuality versus pedophilia and legal.
Man, we touched on
double standards.
Everything.
We did. We touched everything. In fact, we were only supposed to be talking for 60 minutes, and we went on for 90, and the audience didn't leave. I was like, oh my gosh.
It was a good vibe. It was a really good collaboration, but we made a lot of new friends, and it was just a really good time. So we are absolutely planning on going back. We've also registered already for CrimeCon in Orlando next year, which is early May. Even though I can't stand Orlando, I'll go. And yes, I'll go to Disneyland or Disney World with you, Scott.
Yes, you will, whether you want to or not.
But yeah, so a lot of exciting things, I think, coming up for us, for LA Not So Confidential.
Right.
And hopefully we're going to get involved in some local stuff here in LA, and we just have tons of ideas for more shows coming down the line. But please, as always, let us know if you have some as well.
And thank you for being so active on the Facebook page, folks. I mean, it's so much fun getting to interact with people in that venue.
Yeah.
We love it. And if you're not a member yet, please come and join us. We're going to be having a watch party.
Are we?
Remember,
what are we doing?
We go. Chris Brewer, one of our listeners, pointed out something we're going to be doing in a couple of weeks. So it's going to be on a Friday night. We're going to host a watch party on Facebook. So you'll get to hear some of our snark. We can all
let me know the details.
Okay.
I'll be there.
More details to come.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about stalking behaviors. This is very exciting. So Scott teased this, I think, in the last episode that we put out, that we were going to be talking about this soon. And this was really fun to dive into because I really wanted to weave in the entertainment piece to this. And so I got to watch a couple of my favorite movies from the 90s. So we're definitely going to dish about that. But this stalking has this mantra of being the crime of the 90s. And we're going to talk historically why that is.
Right.
But man, Hollywood jumped on that quick as well. Yeah. So this is a very Los Angeles, Hollywood episode, I think, that's a lot of fun, but we're going to talk about some really interesting, serious pieces to stalking. So there was just, in the psychological community and criminology, very little research before the late 90s on stalking. The 90s is when really first world countries began their anti-stalking laws. And it's still something that's being fought for today in a lot of different avenues and more specific behaviors that we sort of umbrella under stalking that countries all over the world are still advocating for. So can you talk a little bit about laws and how that happened and where this came out of? Because some true crime stories really have put that in the forefront.
And I have to, once again, as per usual with my motor mouth, I have to be careful not to go down a rabbit hole with too much of this, because the phenomenon of stalking, there are so many layers to it, and that then branch off into other layers of motivation and criminal versus non-criminal acts, or what constitutes criminality. But basically, just to start, and we're going to circle. I know I always say this. I always say we're going to circle back to that, and I hope we do.
Do
actually.
We ever?
So I don't know if we do. I apologize if we don't. But I don't want to go too far into it now. But I do want to give two brief examples that we'll fill out later of definitive laws that came as a result of stalking cases. Unfortunately and tragically, the reason that these two do exist as laws in the state of California is because of the victim's death.
Well, and that happens a lot.
Right.
A high-profile
It has to be something that brutal and terminal for it to exhibit that way. So one of the most important ones, and here's another recommendation for a documentary. There's a documentary out about Rebecca Schaeffer. Was an incredibly talented young actress back in the 90s. No, was it late 80s? My Sister Sam?
Yes.
So Rebecca Schaeffer, she had some success as a teenage model and actress in New York in the mid 80s, and then made a very successful movement from New York, sort of East Coast work, to a West Coast work in a show called My Sister Sam, with an actress named Pam Dauber this was after Mork and Mindy had ended. It's the premise of the show is that it's two sisters, one substantially older than the other one. Their parents are deceased, so the younger sister comes and lives with her. It was an enormous, almost immediate hit, and one of the reasons it was such a hit was because of the dynamic between the two actresses. It was just really good. I mean, Pam Dauber at this time was a very seasoned comedic actress, and Rebecca Schaeffer was just this sort of unbelievable talent.
Adorable
in all these different ways, and very talented. And her career, even though the show did not last very long, her career took off where she was doing movies, and she's doing movies and television and a lot of different things. And one of the things that comes along with that is fans, and she got a fan that became obsessed with her, dangerously so, ending up in brutally murdering her on her front doorstep. And as a result, and the way he found her address was that he was inspired by another stalking case where the perpetrator had used a private investigator to go into California Department of Motor Vehicle records in order to get someone's address.
Right.
So he was, as mentally ill as this perpetrator was, he had the wherewithal and the funds to hire a private investigator, get Rebecca Schaeffer's address, stalk her for months at the studio, at her home address. There was some back and forth between Los Angeles and his home state, and he ultimately killed her on her doorstep.
Right.
As a result from that, legislation went through where you can no longer access that information through the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Can I do 2 really quick podcast recommendations?
Yes.
So our friends at Criminal Perspective through Crawl Space Media, they just released an episode where they do an interview with Robert Bardot from prison.
Whoa!
So
really?
That's really interesting to just listen all these years later to sort of him talk about the offense and not talk about it. He does a lot of skirting around some questions they ask him. And then, of course, our friends at Hollyweird Paranormal just released an episode all about the Rebecca Schaeffer murder. That's a really good listen as well. And
that's great.
Of course, with their signature Paranormal Aftermath, touching on that. So highly, highly recommend those 2.
Yeah, and one of the, whether paranormal is your shtick or not, it certainly is mine. I love that stuff. But if it's not your cup of tea, I still highly recommend Hollyweird Paranormal. Those 2 hosts, they do the most unbelievable research. They debunk so many things that become,
urban legends
that were never based in fact. And, Tammy and Bryce will be the first ones to go to call BS on that stuff. So I highly recommend it. So that's the one positive thing that came from that particular example is that, you can no longer access DMV records.
Right.
Another one happened that is incredibly tragic. Is what we call here on the West Coast in California, we call a Tarasoff law. So that is stemming from a case, which is the case is Tarasoff versus the Regents of the University of California. This has been talked about a lot. It's very important in law school. I mean, this is an incredibly seminal case in law school across the country,
and
even though
psychology.
And in psychology, right. It reflects on us. Big deal in a big way. So, and this is as far back as the late 60s. So, the history behind it is, in a nutshell, is that a University of California student at Berkeley, Tatiana Tarasoff, came into casual acquaintance of a student from Bengal, India. His name was Prasanit Podar. Mr. Podar became somewhat obsessed with her. And there's some reasons behind it that there were culturally informed, but clearly this individual had an obsession with Tatiana from the beginning, and when his advances were rejected after an initial, she tried to be polite to him, then she had to reject him because he was coming on too strong. The guy really, really went off the deep end. He went to the counseling that was provided by the University of Berkeley, and he told the mental health clinician that he was thinking of killing her. He was so angry. And the therapist, it's not that he didn't necessarily take it seriously, but the framework as a clinician that I understand is that the clinician was under the impression diagnostically that Mr. Padar was diagnosed with schizophrenia paranoid type, both acute and severe. And what I think he was doing in his way, because I do want to give him like a little bit of leeway or wiggle room, is that he thought that level of delusion and that level of anger was informed by the mental illness. The mental illness was doing the heavy lifting as opposed to the obsession. So he really did not consider it to be a legitimate threat towards Ms. Tarasov.
And wanted to be concerned with his client's confidentiality.
Exactly, because confidentiality is enormous in the patient-clinician relationship. Sure. Unfortunately, Mr. Padar murdered quite brutally Ms. Tarasov, which resulted in what we call a Tarasov law, which basically it boils down to this, that mental health clinicians have a duty to warn. So if someone comes into my office and they say, I'm so mad at John Smith, I'm going to kill him. Immediately, I have to take the position. I have to further investigate that,
right?
And I have to first determine whether or not it's a legitimate threat. Does John Smith even exist? Perhaps
Sure.
John Smith doesn't exist. Maybe John Smith doesn't exist, but if my client is so disabled that they delusionally think that every blonde-haired man walking down the street is John Smith, then I have to take that into consideration as well. That's not a Tarasov,
right?
But that could be a Lanterman-Pederis Act, which is a 5150, where I would hospitalize someone. Mm-hmm. In this case, what it did is it changed our view, our perspective and our movement through these type of evaluations, where we have a duty to warn, and that duty to warn extends to the victim.
Right.
So it's not like I can just say, okay, well, I'm going to call the police. Hey, Joe Blow says that he's going to kill John Smith. You guys need to take care of this. And then the police magically take care of it. No, it's a matter of I have to, as a clinician, I now have a responsibility to do what I can to identify, locate, contact, and inform John Smith immediately if I feel that there is an immediate threat to him,
right,
that he is in danger and he needs to go to the police. So these are major laws. This changed the landscape of confidentiality mm-hmm. in the therapeutic setting. There's, a little bit more fluidity with it than I would like sometimes, but then again, I think we do have to err on the side of community safety and individual safety.
Sure, as opposed to one person's confidentiality.
Right. And there's been other legal movement as well, but those are the two big ones that I wanted to just offer before we launch in.
I think a really early misconception when the term stalking came up was that it was only public figures or celebrities that suffered from stalking.
Right.
And, this obsessed fan who's essentially a stranger to this celebrity becomes infatuated and obsessed and seeks them out and stalks them. That was kind of the ideal scenario that people would picture when they heard stalking.
Which is not even the majority of the cases.
No, it happens. The most interesting sometimes.
Exactly, the most sort of salacious and interesting ones. But unfortunately, the vast majority of stalking cases are family members or
yes,
quote unquote loved ones.
I'll break that down of like relationship in a little bit. So as far as the definition of stalking, it's really interesting because so much of the time we look at crimes and the criteria for a crime is based on the perpetrator's actions, right? Like you have to meet, to be arrested for burglary, you have to have entered a dwelling or a structure with the intent to commit a felony. It's just based on the action of the offender. And stalking is one of those that sort of developed out of actually the reaction and perception of the victim and how they were feeling, because stalking is a cluster of behaviors or a combination or multitude of behaviors that kind of aren't that big of a deal or seem harmless until it's done over and over and over again. And it's completely controlling the victim's life.
It horribly impacts the victim's life.
So we're talking about, it can include illegal means of harassment, but it could also just be, annoying or sort of routine actions that then becomes this cluster of activities that evokes fear and distress in a victim. And once they've lost control over their lives and their environment because they're editing their routines and their behaviors, and they're shaping their environment to avoid this other person or what the harassment that they're causing, this does so much damage. I mean, you can imagine how distressing that would be, but it completely changes their worldview. I mean, seeing the world as an unsafe and untrustworthy place. I mean, chronic long-term issues for victims. So it's sort of like terrorism. What is central to the crime is the reaction of the victim and how they then go out and lead their lives. So terrorists think, hey, and I know we've talked about this before. I think we were talking about the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting. That's what terrorism is. It's to disrupt a person's seemingly normal life, so they're held in fear. And there is where the power is. But it's a very victim-centered crime. It is up to the discretion of the victim of what they deem harassing and therefore stalking. Victims, on average, are harassed or stalked. The stalking period is about 13 months. I say average because we're talking about all forms of stalking and all types of relationships. But the majority, a third of it, is an ex-spouse specifically. 28% of the perpetrators were casual acquaintances with the victim. 14% are a former romantic partner or somebody that they dated even, one time. Only 8% of the time is it a stranger. So what we kind of touched on with celebrity. And then 5% of the time it's a family member. So women are more likely to be stalked by a former intimate partner, and men are more likely to be stalked by a casual acquaintance where there maybe wasn't even a romantic
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Interlude.
I think also I just want to add in here something that I think is really important as an overarching paradigm of this when we took the influences of gender and socialization, but the idea that I think we're more aware, aka woke, to this now than we were in the past. But growing up, I remember sort of this predominant message was, well, if you really like her, you have to show her how much you like her, which also then a step further is, well, she's just ignoring you because she wants you to work harder.
Right. Oh,
or she's pretending she's playing hard to get, so you have to work harder. And that's a terrible message to send. I think of the classic
scene from Say Anything, the movie where he's holding the radio up outside her window, right?
How fucking creepy. But that's like an iconic movie scene,
Completely iconic. And we could probably just sit here and read a list of all of the movies where if he just tries hard enough, it ends up with her, and living happily ever after. Yeah.
I mean, I remember there was going as far
John
back
Cusack,
as reading.
I
know. Well, it's also just sort of looking through experience through a different lens. I mean, there's something, there's an interesting. I won't say who it is because this is another episode. But there's a Netflix stand-up special right now of a comedian who's been through a particularly challenging time in the last year. And one of the things that he says is, time gives us all sorts of perspective. And in 50 years, we're probably going to look back and go, did you know that people used to walk past the homeless and just let them lay there on the sidewalk instead of doing anything?
Wow.
So it's about how, our perspective changes.
Totally. We'll get into that more with some of the movies I'm going to cover.
Yes, exactly.
So with the class, there's different classifications, as I talked about. As I broke down the percentages, but the official classifications of offenders when it comes to stalking can be broken down this way. So there's what we call prior intimates. So there has been a prior romantic relationship, but it could also be an emotionally intimate relationship as well. So like really close friends or a long-standing business relationship. This usually includes behaviors like following, surveillance.
Can I just put a caveat in that?
Please.
So what I want to add into that as we come back around to is that you're saying that there is a relationship there. Let's also leave room for a perceived relationship. Now that goes into they don't know each other. Like you're talking about, these are intimates.
Yes, these are emotionally intimate relationships.
Right. Yeah. And then there are some that have no connection whatsoever. Right. And yet the nature of their mental illness or their delusions is that they are in these intimate relationships.
You can talk about that in the celebrity piece.
Yes.
So following, surveillance, property damage, all the way up into threats and violence happen in these types of relationships or stalking incidents. With this type of relationship, the duration of the stalking behavior increases usually with the stalker's emotional investment in the relationship. So the longer it's gone on and the more invested they are, it'll probably last longer. It'll probably be more severe.
Right.
Then there's the friends or casual acquaintance category. This is the one that I say men sort of suffer as victims from more than women. And it's when someone that's a casual acquaintance in their life is really looking to try and start a romantic relationship with them, but they are then dismissed or rejected. When you think of the infatuation of a woman with a man that's untouchable or, it's not realistic that they would be together for whatever reason, this is sort of that category, and the victim is often driven by the rejection, the humiliation that comes with that, and that if I just work hard enough and show him what he's missing out on, eventually he'll be mine, we'll live happily ever after.
I just have to find the way to change myself to make myself more attractive to him.
Yeah.
That is pathological there.
Yes. There's also, here we go. We could talk about this one. Actually, you can talk about this one. It's a category it's called professional contacts. And so when certain professionals are in frequent contact with the lonely and disordered, so mental health professionals, primary care physicians, social workers, lawyers, teachers, dancers at Disneyland. Hang on, we will circle back to that. Don't worry.
That's actually a real thing.
Where sympathy and attention is part of the relationship, the professional relationship, but it's easily reconstructed as romantic interest by the patient or the client.
It's a misinterpretation.
Absolutely. So the behaviors that are most common with this are repeated phone calls, letter writing, and then when it goes sour, attack on the professional's reputation. So that can be complaints to the workplace, contacting their professional boards and making complaints, all the way up into some of the other more threatening and violent behavior. But it's a lot of this sort of harassment that I talked about. Can we stop for an interlude about your experience here? Did you want to talk about it here? Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, these are some things that are a little bit more lighthearted than some of the other things we're going to be talking about later. But I wanted to give a perspective because when I talk a little bit later, I'm going to talk about the ones that are not so common. but are based in mental health issues and based on delusional disorder. I have not myself experienced that as a victim, but I do have an interesting take on it. So I have two incidents that I want to share, and one is that when I moved here years ago, in my 3 careers ago, and I was fresh to LA. One of my first jobs was as a Kid of the Kingdom. And
what is that?
The Kid of the Kingdom is a performer at Disneyland.
Okay.
So I was.
Is that what they called you guys instead of cast members? Back then?
We were called Kids of the Kingdom.
That's kind of creepy. I don't know.
It wasn't then. Now it is.
Okay,
but
true.
It was a great job. It was a union gig. It was a really cool show that was done. Oh my gosh, that theater was so. It was what used to be called Videopolis.
Videopolis.
So it was a dance club at night, and then it was this enormous outdoor theater. Doing 5 shows a day. So it was
Is that
really
the one
strenuous.
in Tomorrowland? Like where the Star Wars stuff is
it's
now?
over by Fantasy. It's over by It's a Small World.
Oh, yeah,
And now it's called Mickey's Magic Map.
Yeah.
Okay, we are just way too much of Disney geeks to be talking about that. But here's the thing that happened. It was a show based on Snow White. So it was like kind of condensing into 35 minutes.
Can I guess which dwarf you were?
I was not a dwarf. I was a Kid of the Kingdom. I was a backup dancer. And there were 2 casts. And it was 4 days on, 4 days off. So it was a really great gig with union benefits and union pay and some of the most hilarious people I've ever worked with. It was really great. So we're in the middle of rehearsals, and about 3 weeks in, 4 guys in suits come in looking very, very official, and they have both casts line up against one of the walls. And I was thinking, oh shit, we're going to get fired. People are getting fired for something. And they were walking, and they would look at us very intently, and there were people being picked out.
Oh my God.
You stand over there, you stand over there. And I was one of the ones, you need to come with us. Immediately, like, what did I do? I thought I was going to get fired.
Go to Disney jail?
Go to Disney jail, yeah. You're fucked up now. But so what happened is like it was, about 50-50 male and female, and we get taken to a corner, and we get sat down at a table, and the guys introduce themselves as security, and they give us this very odd kind of vague speech, and what they say is, you fit a profile physically that generally gets a lot of attention. And I looked around, and I was like, what is it about us? And it was, there were, we weren't just all white,
right,
blonde, blue-eyed. I'm not blue-eyed. I'm brown-eyed and have brown hair. But we had, like, certain features. Like, and I mean, every dancer is in shape. So it's not like we were, like, that in better shape or anything. But it was sort of a look, like big white smiles and, And they said, but what we have come to know over the years of doing live shows at Disney is that your physical characteristics will tend to draw certain individuals' attention. And what we encourage you to do is not respond in any way. Don't be too friendly. Don't be rude, but don't be friendly with them. Don't. And I was so young at the time. I was like, what are we talking about? Like, it's that big of a deal? Like, you got to be kidding. It's not that big of a deal.
And I think it's super progressive of the security team at Disney to have identified this and then be sort of proactive about it. That's really, for that time, that's good risk assessment.
It really is. I mean, for that long ago, and it was a very long time ago. Sure. I mean, it's way sort of not even in the ballpark of what we have now.
Right.
But and I didn't take it seriously. I did not take it seriously. And I have a good friend, Darren Cormier, he's a nurse in New Orleans, and he was out here for several years as a performer, like I was, and he and I got mistaken for being brothers a lot because we had the same look, and we were next to each other in the show. And I noticed after about 2 weeks that there were 2 middle-aged women sitting in the front row every single show 4 days a week. So that's 5 shows a day, 4 days a week.
Whoa.
Which was blowing my mind. I mean, we were like, and, you know, you're so young, you just don't put things into context. You're like, what the hell is this? That's kind of crazy. And we're kind of like, as we're doing the dance numbers, we're so far, like you can talk out of the corner of your mouth, and Darren's going like, and he's got this strong Louisiana drawl, like, Scott, those women are looking at you. I'm like, no, they're not. They're looking at you. No, they're looking at you. I can tell. Watch. And so he dances away from me, and I notice that like their faces stay focused on me. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And then I noticed that one of them had a video camera all the time. It was on me all the time, and the other one was snapping pictures. So, like,
so instead of Humpty and Dumpty, they were lonely and disordered. This one had a weird but decent ending. But, you know, my dance partner, Connie, in the show, she and I we did pas de deux and lifts and stuff. And her parents came from like Ohio for a weekend, and they were seeing the shows, and they happened to sit next to the women and said, oh, our daughter Connie is in the show. Once they figured out an in, they were like, can we meet Scott? Can we meet him? We really want to meet him. And I said, well, we're not supposed to do that. Like those guys told us not to engage. And, I mean, who knows? I was so young and dumb. If it had been like some hot person, like I probably would have like, oh yeah, I want to meet you. But you know, it was like these two ladies. Like, what do I know? Yeah. What do I know? So Connie comes back, and she says she's white as a sheet, and she has a stack of pictures, and she said, well, they want me to give these to you. And it was hundreds of pictures of me with her. And she said, Scott, that's not what's creepy is this. And she held up one of the pictures, and she had been cut out of all the photos. Like that we'd be like kind of holding each other and arms outstretched, and she was doing what we call like a death spiral lift, and they'd cut her picture off at the wrist. And so they had like so little like, hey, you're not in any of our pictures. In fact, we cut you out, but can you go deliver these? Oh my God.
And I was like, are you kidding me? That she goes, that's not, they said that they have like albums and albums of just you in the show.
Videos.
And so I met them, like I ended up like kind of not being able to avoid them, and they were very friendly and awkward.
Yeah. And
like very like fans. They were nice, and I was kind of like, oh, well, it's nice to meet you, and I got to go to a rehearsal. And so I thought that was that. And then when my contract ended, somehow they had gotten my home address, and I got Christmas cards. I got for a couple of years.
Holy shit!
So was I ever threatened? I was never threatened, but it like now looking back on it, it feels very invasive and weird. And like, and how did you get my address?
Right.
Well, I later found out that they actually were administrative employees of the park, and that's, I mean, well, you're not clearly not doing your job if you're
at all these shows.
The show's 5 days a week,
and then you're digging into employee records.
Yeah, I mean that was really creepy, but like no harm ever came from it. But now let me show you something.
Not yet.
Not yet. Really, they could still be after me. Boy, that'd be sad if they saw this fat ass trying to fit in that costume. But now being on the other side, years later, I had this really fantastic gig. It was my last gig in entertainment, working as a researcher, legal clearance, and segment producer for DVDs. And one of the biggest projects I got to work on, which is still to I'm so proud of this work for Peller and Multimedia, was doing the supplemental DVD materials for the Lord of the Rings movies. So this was back in the day when you would buy a set of DVDs and there would be 4 additional DVDs full of documentaries. Right. Here's how we made the helmets. Here's how we designed the sets. I mean, it's really amazing.
Nerd alert.
Total nerd alert. So there was a point at which it wasn't the segments I was working on, but this editor came to me and said, hey, we're doing a special on Pippin and Merry, who are the 2 younger hobbits that go on the quest. Stop rolling your eyes. You're
Sorry.
totally rolling your
Sorry.
eyes.
What were you talking about?
What are we talking about? So one of the actors is a British actor or Irish actor, Dominic Monaghan. He is an amazing actor. He was on Lost afterwards. I mean, he's had a really interesting career. So what I was doing was I was tasked with, we need you to listen to all of this B footage, which was him being interviewed on set. So they would have 7 years that it took to do all these movies. And they would hey, how's it like to wear this costume? Or what do you miss most about being away from your family? So I was sitting for hours and hours listening to interviews of this unbelievably intelligent and charming young man who was funny and wise beyond his years and incredibly grounded for being in what's going to be this huge world phenomenon of entertainment. And I just remember coming away from it going, oh God, what a nice guy.
Sure.
What a really cool guy, and really liking him. So our offices were on Hollywood Boulevard, and about 4 months later, we completely finished that project. We moved on to something else, and I'm walking down the street, and Dominic Monaghan is walking down the street with his girlfriend. So, and everybody calls him Dom, and I was like, Dom, how you doing? Hey, it's so good to see you. So the look of terror that came on this guy's face.
Oh, I bet.
And I caught myself in that moment going, oh, fuck, I don't know him.
We've never met.
We've never met. I've just been sitting in a fucking dark room watching hours and hours of interviews with you.
We're best friends.
And in that, we're best friends. So in that moment, I had a slip. And I remember laughing at myself then, because it was before I made the career switch. Uh-huh. But now looking back at that in the context of stalking and delusional belief systems, here's someone, I'm not disordered,
right,
or I'm neurotypical in most ways, and I fell for it for that brief moment. Right. So you can see if someone is disordered or has something else going on as a primary drive, how easy it would be to fall into that. And but I remember so distinctly the terror in his eyes, and then trying to back up from going, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know you. I work with Peller and Multimedia. We're right here in this.
Trying to explain yourself.
By now he's a celebrity, so who knows what other horrible experiences he's had. And he's like, yeah, and kind of runs away with his girlfriend, which he did the smart thing, because I could have been dangerous. Right. But
wow, anyway. That's so interesting, the two sides of that.
Yeah.
And catching yourself in that, but like you said, so easy to get wrapped up in just your perspective. And then here's this just happenstance meeting, that you just reacted on. Yeah, amazing. That kind of. I mean, you think about sort of the people that are so socially isolated. We've even talked about this in our work about our episode about incels, right? And that phenomena, people who just have these very isolated lives, and become obsessed with a particular show, and that becomes their reality. Mm-hmm. And certainly in the case of Rebecca Schaefer, she moved from being a television actress into doing feature films, and she moved into doing things that were arty and edgy, and the big shift for her was a movie called Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills. Right. She's an adult, and she has not really a sex scene, but she's in bed with another actor, and that was what pushed Bardo over the edge. Right, because she suddenly was this girl next door, innocent, pure being before.
Exactly, and now, and that even he says that in his interviews, is like, you're just a typical Hollywood whore. So now he's been pushed over the edge. He's got that. Interesting to think if there was any sort of suicidality in his background, because when there's that fluidity between suicidality and homicidality, all it needs is one trigger for it to ignite into violence.
Yeah. So there's 3 more categories of relationships. The next one is workplace contacts. So this can be any variation of employer-supervisor, employer-employee, employee-employee, or customer and service provider. So
do we have stats on that? Because I actually did not know about that particular category.
I don't have any stats beyond just sort of that being a category, and then it's usually either like a would-be suitor becoming obsessed and stalking again, like a romantic interest.
And what a perfect environment, because you're there 40 hours a week. Right? Much like my 2 stalkers at Disneyland.
Yes.
Sitting in the heat, just sweating and filming me.
Or it's more of disgruntled employee. So, we've talked about threat assessment and people that feel like they need to right wrongs when they feel like they've been wronged. And that might include stalking someone and then exploding into violence at some point for revenge. And then there's the stranger category. So this is the case in which the victims are not aware of the perpetrator. The perpetrator, again, may think that they have more of a relationship with the person. I always like to use the example of like a woman who works at like a 7-Eleven and hundreds of customers, right? In and out. And one customer might think because he comes in when she's working and they have this exchange that they know each other, but to her, she wouldn't be able to pick him out.
Yeah.
He's just another customer. So they are strangers. And a lot of the stranger stalking scenarios, the stalking happens as a plan to a sexual attack in the future. So whether it's an adult, it could be a child that is the victim of this. And the targets are selected based on things like physical attractiveness or social status, because that's a lot of times the only thing they're going on because they don't know the person.
Right.
They're going with what's on the outside. And obviously this day and age, this can be done a lot more via the internet and online.
Frighteningly so.
Yeah. A lot like the big Netflix movie You, where the individual did a lot of his homework when stalking this customer up front, and then turned that into this happenstance relationship that he gets into with her by knowing all these things about her. And then, okay, this is how I'm going to formulate myself so she likes me and thinks I'm everything she's looking for.
Yeah, that's going to work.
Yeah. It worked out really interesting in that show. And then there's the famous. So the famous, the celebrity, this is what we were talking about with a lot of delusions that come in and how law enforcement agencies are dealing with this.
Right. So you and I are pretty coy about our day jobs.
Right.
It's safe to say that we both peripherally are exposed to this, and without...
I mean, we live and work in Los Angeles.
Exactly. So. And one of the things I'll say is that I have experience with work the Los Angeles Police Department in the division called TMU, which is the Threat Management Unit. And this is amazing to me because it really is like a TV show. Sometimes, you and I will be talking about how things are so far from reality. They're not really, Law and Order so many times is not based in what really happens at a police station or a division. But the Threat Management Unit, like they could just turn on a camera and that would be fascinating because these are detectives highly, highly experienced in evaluating threats to high profile, or even if they're not high profile, if it's a potential for a high profile stalking case, not because the victim is high profile, but because it's so egregious in potential.
Right.
And one of the things that they deal with is really the reality of fame. And having my background, having come from, working as a performer, but then transitioning into casting and working in production and talent management, I have a perspective on, people who really want to seek celebrity. There are some people out there like Lisa Rinna, who's one of the Real Housewives and has been a soap star. I have a lot of admiration for her because she's really authentic. I'm not really an actress. I'm not really that great. I wanted to be famous. This is what I'm doing. This is my goal. You know what? She's authentic. Go for it. Right? She's being honest with herself.
Right.
And then I think other people's motivations maybe are a little bit murkier, as well as people that just want to be actors. But do they really know what they're signing up for? And I don't think any of them know, because
at the beginning they have to say, like, who cares? I want this so bad, that might be a consequence, but they're not going to cross that bridge until they actually see it or becomes real.
Right. And if they did, then we might be bereft of some amazing talent. I mean, that would be the trade-off, which is, you can't, I mean, that's a what if that we don't know about. But, this has been around. I mean, this has been around. Stalking and a sort of a delusional obsession with high-profile people has been around for hundreds of years. And in Victorian England, it was focused on the Queen. That the Queen is conspiring against me, or the Queen is communicating to me through these odd means, and I have a special relationship with this politician. But now we live in an era that is a cult of celebrity, where there's all different levels of celebrity. There are YouTube stars that are being stalked. There are Instagram influencers
that are more accessible, really.
Right. And celebrities are more accessible than they've ever been, because so much of celebrity is based on social media presence. And basically your publicist and your agent are telling you, hey, we got to get your Instagram followers up.
Right.
You look at the number that Taylor Swift has, and God forbid you say something bad about Taylor Swift, because those Swifties they'll cut you off at the knees, right?
They will.
They've done it to a couple of celebrities.
But you think about the classic, saying where you're at and, posting and tagging a location. And then when Kim Kardashian was robbed, was it in Paris?
Right.
And the dangers of that, how it's like happening in real time.
Right. So let's say, as a perfect example, is an actor who part of his, say he's been an actor on a relatively well-received television show for 6 seasons. 6 seasons, you're set. Basically, you're making a lot of money. That's enough for a show to go into syndication that's going to then get you residuals for years. If you work your money right, you don't ever have to work again. However, a lot of people parlay that into other things, such as, it could be one wants to be a lifestyle guru, or one wants to be, that's a perfect example. Gwyneth Paltrow had a horrific stalker after her for years. But in this day and age where, let's say that actor decides he's going to write a book, well, part of promoting that book is being on Instagram. Hey, I'm at Vroman's this Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Please come by.
Right.
The person who is the delusional stalker will integrate that into their belief system and say, "Oh, he's telling me
where he's going
to be. That's an open invitation to come down." So anyway, to circle back around to the TMU, they deal with this on a regular basis. They educate law enforcement from around the country on this. And then there's a whole private industry that's built up by a great author, Gavin DeBecker.
Right.
What did he write? The Gift of Fear?
The book is The Gift of Fear. If you are a young woman or have daughters, buy this book. Yeah. My dad gave it to me, I think, right around my 18th birthday. And it is phenomenal to sit back and be mindful of, here's how we need to act and listen to our gut and react in order to keep ourselves safe. I mean, it sort of was the original fuck politeness, stay sexy, don't get murdered. Yeah. My favorite murder mantras. Gavin DeBecker was putting this out in a book 20 years ago. Yeah. And, the classic scenario is like, we are, as women, are raised to be so goddamn polite all the time. And we don't want to be rude when it's just us and a man who's given us the fucking creeps to get into the elevator with him, to get into a steel locked box with someone that we have a weird, hair on the back of our neck standing up issue. And we just do it. Yeah. Because, oh my God, how rude would it be if this is just a nice guy? Screw that. Wait for the next elevator. Go into the bathroom. Absolutely. And wait. So it's a wonderful book that talks about all of these scenarios. He has some follow-up books that go into some other issues, especially when we talk about when terrorism after 9/11 came up, and just being aware and being hypervigilant. Yeah, so,
I mean, he also has a private security firm in Los Angeles that could be a show about that.
Yeah.
Because he works with the police, he works with the various police agencies, And I think that sometimes they work together very closely, but then what I can see as probably problematic sometimes is that from a police perspective, from a law enforcement perspective, the first thing that we're going to encourage, and I've even done this as a mental health professional, pairing with a law enforcement, is I'll be telling someone, you need to file a restraining order.
Right.
You need to it needs to happen right now. And the reality is that in many cases that restraining order has very blunt teeth. It's not going to help that much, but it is the beginning of a paper trail. And that's
Correct.
part of what's wrong with our system, is that we place women as well as male victims, people in this position, we put them in the position of being responsible for creating that paper trail for their safety. And it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
And I think, and then there are other private firms that'll go, oh, well, no, you're really famous, and we don't want, if we call attention to this, then TMZ is going to get on it, and then you're going to call even more attention. So, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. I would always err on the side of caution and say, we'll start with the restraining order, work with the police, and...
But you're right. I remember in working in law enforcement, and there was one particular stalking case that kind of sticks out to me, that just a woman in our city was dealing with her ex-husband, and as a law enforcement officer trying to help her night after night when she would call with something new, I felt so incredibly helpless, and telling her to get a restraining order, as the words were coming out of my mouth, I'm like, this isn't going to do shit for this guy.
Right.
Like, it is just a piece of paper. And she asked me that, like, how is this going to protect me? And what am I supposed to tell her? It's not. And we're going to do the best we can, but our hands were so tied.
I know, but let's
tough.
be plain though, where it lays the groundwork, because God forbid something happens and he or she has not filed a restraining order. The first thing, if it goes to trial, if it goes to any legal action, the first thing that defense attorney from the other side is going to do is turn around and go, well, you must have not have been threatened because you didn't file a restraining order.
All the way down the line. But how is that helping her tonight?
It doesn't.
It's not, and she's terrified. And
well, the only thing that helps in a situation like that is actually practical action, which is what DeBecker talks about, which is... but then we also have to look at it in terms of, it's the same issue that comes up in the subject of domestic violence, of, once again, we are putting the responsibility on the victim of a potential crime to take all these actions that may not be practical.
Right.
Like, if it's a single mom and she's got 2 toddlers and we're telling her, you need to get out of your house and go stay somewhere where nobody knows you, it's like, well, how the fuck am I going to do that? I don't have any money. I don't have any means. Perhaps they don't have a support system that will allow them to do that.
Yes, that's definitely the uniqueness of this crime. So, in Los Angeles, how far do people come try and meet or stalk their...
Literally all over the world.
Wow.
Literally all over the world. And I can get totally... When I've had a couple of glasses of wine in me, I'll get totally hippy-dippy about, like, the energetic underpinnings of why that happens. But on a base level, the most obvious is it's because this is the center of entertainment.
Right. And
we, back in the ancient times, the celebrities were Zeus and Hera and Aphrodite. And in today's world, it's celebrities. These are our gods. And they rise and they fall very quickly, but people get obsessed. I mean, we have people that come here, like the number of people that come here from around the world that are convinced they're married to Kanye is unbelievable. God. I mean, it's it's crazy. But he's not the only one. There are plenty of B and C and D level celebrities that are like, wait, what? This person thinks that we're in a relationship, and I've been in the position of having to lead them through. This is what's going on. This is how you need to take care of yourself. I've also been on the other side where, working with. I mean, what I generally work with when it comes to, if it gets referred to me in my position, it's because that individual who is stalking generally falls into the diagnostic category of delusional disorder.
Right.
So, and we'll go over some of that, but like the delusional is a delusion is a fixed belief, and I mean fixed like it is solid. It's not going anywhere, and it might not, like, we don't include it with schizophrenia because this person is not having auditory or visual hallucinations per se, but they might interpret, hey, I'm sitting here at the gym, and while I'm working out, I'm listening to music, and I'm pretty sure that Brad Pitt is sending me a message through this song. He's telling me that he really wants me to come visit him, and that we need to solidify our relationship.
Right. So they're not actually hearing that. Obviously, but it's a belief rather than experiencing an auditory hallucination.
So let me give a caveat here. Like, I want the audience listening to understand that every example I give is an actual example.
Okay.
However, it has been de-identified.
Right.
So I may have switched the gender. I may have switched the race. I may have switched the level of celebrity. I may have switched the description of the perpetrator. But these are all things that happen literally on a daily basis in Los Angeles.
I have a friend that is a police officer in the Hollywood area, and he and I went to the academy together, and he was telling me what a trip it was to work in Hollywood, because the differences between, dealing with the homeless individual who is covered in bed bugs and sleeping on the street and doesn't care, to responding to such and such celebrity's house because some guy was just caught outside their house with a hacksaw in his trunk and
duct tape and rope and chloroform.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Just what an interesting, diverse place that is to work.
Yeah. And especially when you get to that particular example, I mean, one that was very big in the news years ago was Steven Spielberg had a stalker. And this guy had the type of, he was so ill, and he had an erotomanic fixation with Steven Spielberg and another celebrity, but his plan was quite violent. He had really thought out this elaborate plan and had the van tricked out, like an S&M, a BDSM van tricked out with a complete rape and kidnapping kit. He had a legit plan because he had a perceived grudge. And so that goes back into the categories that you were talking about. There's
delusional and a perceived grudge.
Right, a perceived grudge.
Well, that is his delusion.
So there could be perceived, like they could have the perception that they're in a relationship, or they could have the perception that this person has done them wrong. I remember one case where an individual was going after a very rapidly rising female actress because this perpetrator felt that her career had been stolen. Like, that was my job. I was supposed to get that job. Well, this person doesn't have an agent, has never auditioned, never even got close to that. But that was supposed to be my job. Jeez. And they are convinced of it. So, when we look at the classifications of delusional disorder, which, once again, like I was saying, is a fixed, solid system of belief about the world around them, that can fall into different categories. There's about 6 different categories, but the one that are most really specific to the idea of stalking are erotomania, which is the fixed delusion, the fixed belief that another person, and generally a celebrity or a prominent figure, is in love with the perpetrator, and they may breach laws, and they will do anything to make contact with the desired person. Then there's a grandiose typology, which is sort of a grandiosity is a word that means that everything I do is great. Like, I have the best ideas, I have the best approach to everything I ship. Or
like, I am the Queen of England.
I am, exactly, yeah.
I can't be in this jail. Are you kidding me?
Right.
My people will be calling you right now to get me out.
Exactly. So a delusion like that actually doesn't generally focus on another person because it's so internal.
Right.
Occasionally that will turn into involving a victim. But the other 2 types that we were talking about that are, so we start with erotomanic God, why can't I predict?
I don't know. That's a hard one for me, too.
I think it's the weather. I'm blaming it on the weather why I can't pronounce today. But there's also the jealous type, so the delusion that the person's sexual partner or intimate partner is unfaithful, and that is untrue. They are not unfaithful. And they may basically stalk, follow, monitor with cameras, with emails. I mean, all sorts of monitoring. And very, very sad cases because these are fixed. Like there is
totally.
There's no breaking out of that.
Pretty sure I have a client like that right now.
But also, you know, not statistically necessarily prone to violence, but it can be triggered into violence. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the subcategory of persecutory type, which it believes that this person is like, this woman stole my job. My landlord from 30 years ago. My landlord from 30 years ago has followed me from apartment to apartment, and she breaks in and she moves things around. She never steals anything. She's trying to drive me crazy.
Right.
Now that's...
Yes.
With some de-identification, that's a literal case I had.
I bet.
So the problem with these people with delusional disorder is that, generally speaking, they're very high functioning.
Yep.
They, there are some that are quite low functioning, but there are others that hold jobs and they can be very guarded about this particular area of their life. They don't have insight into their delusion, but they do have enough insight to know that they can't talk about it around other people or they will be regarded as crazy.
Yep.
So that's really, really difficult to deal with.
It is. But they feel comfortable seeking out treatment because you're now a therapist that will listen to it and not necessarily judge them for it or call them crazy, and then they can get it out. So someone's buying into their belief.
But the minute you challenge it, they're gone.
Yeah.
And the minute you challenge any of that, I mean, there are some people. There's actually a technique. There's a sort of a motivational interviewing technique for trying to break through some of the delusions, and one of them is sort of the paranoid delusion that people are that. Let's flip it around. Instead of them being stalked, they are being stalked, and there's the idea that that I'm fully functioning in all these different ways, but for some reason these people are following me in cars.
Yeah.
And I know they're following me. I see them, they have blacked out windows, and sometimes they're in the trees outside. So that falls into a category. That's actually a non-bizarre delusion because that's actually within the realm of reality.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
We're not saying that demonic ghost women are raping you nightly, which would be a bizarre delusion. But a non-bizarre is something that actually could happen, and that brings up the idea of functional paranoia versus delusional paranoia. So functional paranoia is people are out to get me. Well, yeah, I live in a gang-infested neighborhood, and I'm an ex-gang member, and these people may be after me. That's actual. That functional paranoia is keeping you healthy.
Right.
You have to stay on your feet, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. So what was I going to go to after that? So one of the things that this delusion is fixed and persistent. No matter the amount of evidence you come up with is going to displace that. No, Kim Kardashian is sending me notes.
Right. There's no arguing with it or changing their mind.
Absolutely not. Right. So it's out of keeping, and it's very unlikely it's just unlikely that it's happening. So here's someone that's like a 7-Eleven cashier in Wetumpka, Alabama, but somehow she has a relationship with Channing Tatum.
Right.
That's just not really likely, but somehow she's developed this and it's going to be fixed and non-moving. Any attempts to contradict that belief are generally very unsuccessful.
Do you know if here in the United States or where you work, does anyone use, what sort of assessments do you use? And do you guys use the DASH, which is... I
don't know the DASH.
So the DASH...
Usually the general threat assessment is like, are your thoughts to harm this person?
Well, not... So this is more specifically for stalking and domestic type situations. Okay. So the DASH is a risk assessment and management model that was developed by Laura Richards. So you guys might know her from podcast Real Crime Profile with Jim Clemente. She was co-producer on the case of JonBenet Ramsey, and consulting producer on the Dirty John Netflix, or not, was it Netflix? Was it? No, it was on television.
Yeah.
But so she is a renowned international expert on domestic violence, stalking, sexual behavior, homicide and risk assessment, and she's out of the UK. But she developed this assessment model. It was really interesting. I'm not trained in it. I have looked at it, but it's basically a scoring mechanism. It looks like you do an interview with the victim, and you're talking about all kinds of things, from behaviors, relationships, feelings. Are you feeling depressed or having suicidal thoughts? Has, so-and-so ever hurt the children? Is the abuse getting worse?
And that's a particularly important one. I mean, from all the literature that I've read, is that looking at the social support network, they may have some family or they may have some limited social network, but their predominant delusion and obsession takes up so much of their bandwidth that they really don't have much of a support system otherwise. And that's why we see the statistics rise for men being the perpetrators, because, and I can't help but link it to the incel phenomenon as well. As basically sitting in a dark room and surrounding yourself with, this tunnel vision.
But this is an interview that's done with the victim of a stalking case, where you ask about the current situation, you ask about effects on children or dependents, the domestic violence history, and about the abuser. And basically you tally this up and it looks at, okay, what's the risk to the victim, standard, medium, or high? But I know she's also created a foundation called Paladin, and it's the world's first national stalking advocacy service. So a lot of what they do, so their definition, this was a really good definition of stalking that I found, is, quote, a pattern of unwanted, fixated, and obsessive behavior which is intrusive and causes fear of violence or serious alarm or distress. And the Paladin Foundation, they provide trauma-informed support, advice, and advocacy to high-risk victims. They raise awareness of dangers and risks of stalking, campaign on the behalf of victims, just a lot of really good work. One of her missions right now is to try and get a registry for repeat high-risk stalkers and domestic abusers.
I think I completely concur with that.
I think that's such an interesting concept. And for repeat, not just the first timer. Like, let's not fuck this up like we did with sex offender registry.
Right.
But I think it's really interesting work that's being done.
Once again, like when we talked in other episodes about the sex offender registry and the idea, I know that we've touched on this before, the idea that we got a lot of people caught in that net that don't necessarily need to be in there.
And it actually it destabilizes them and makes them more risky to the community.
Exactly, and the same thing could happen in these cases with stalkers. That if we don't try and tease out the difference between them, is it something that can be addressed in a different way?
Yeah. Did you want to talk about anything else before I skip to the movies?
What did I want to say? I wanted to say that, when we talk about the idea of delusions, they can last for an incredibly long time because they are so fixed. And while we talk about, there are examples, we could just go on and on and on about different celebrities that have been stalked. I mean, every high celebrity. I'm not a huge fan of Gwyneth Paltrow. However, what she went through with her stalker was brutal, and she had to testify in front of him in court, which I think is absolutely terrible that, you have to face that. And then there's one particular one from the 70s that, I'm glad that there's been some research about this and then it's been published on the web, because I think it's a particularly egregious example, and it's also hitting on the many different aspects of mental health and how that plays into stalking. And this is about the case of Mary Stauffer and her perpetrator Ming Shen Shui, who is a Taiwanese national. His family immigrated to Minnesota back in the 70s. So, or the late 60s actually. So as a high schooler, Ming Sen-shui had Miss Stauffer as a teacher and somehow became erotomaniacally fixated on her to the point where he stalked her for 15 years. So stalked her for 15 years, finally kidnaps her and her daughter, and shoves them in the trunk of his car at gunpoint. Stops later to open the trunk. 2 6-year-old boys notice that there are bodies in the trunk. He grabs one of the 6 years old and shoves him in the trunk too because now he has a witness. Later kills that child and then brutally rapes Mary for almost up to 2 weeks. I mean, it's just an awful.
Her dead body?
No, she's still alive. The child died.
Gotcha.
She survived, but and when she was trying to find out like why, his reasoning was that when he had a less than perfect score, which ruined his life. So none of this was true. He built up this delusion around an interaction with her. So there was like one interaction with her as a teacher, and this is a guy that excelled in the community.
Like a delusion within a delusion.
Exactly.
It's Inception.
So exactly, and he was like a successful athlete, and he was a successful student. But the profundity of his mental illness had an incredible impact in that way, and this poor woman was incredibly scarred by it. And then the one last thing I'd say before we move on is that and I highly recommend, I remember reading this article years ago. Wired magazine had an article in 2007 about really one of the first major cases of cyberstalking. And cyberstalking is pretty commonplace now. Like there was a ridiculous case of a woman with an incredibly successful Harry Potter fan site. And it became like one of the biggest fan sites in the world. And some woman in Australia didn't like what she posted and relentlessly stalked her for years, and having to take care of it across international lines just really impacted this young woman's life. It was horrible. But for those of you that are familiar with the rock band Linkin Park, Chester Charlie Bennington, who is the lead singer of Linkin Park, had a stalker that was later found to be a government employee working at a nuclear facility that had hacked into his Mac accounts. So this was when the beginning of the cloud was existing, and she knew where he was going. She was following all of his emails because her job took her maybe 15 minutes of an entire day. So the rest of her time she was obsessed. She was calling at times night. She hacked into their child's baby monitor.
Oh God!
I mean, just terrible, terrible things. Now this is someone who wasn't necessarily delusional, but was a big fan and just allowed herself to become obsessed and jealous of his relationship with his wife and their child. Wow. And she terrorized him for years.
Rest in peace, Chester.
I know. It's very sad.
Okay, so with the stalking laws of the 90s, Hollywood for sure picked that up and ran with it. So some of the most famous movies about stalking, actually pre-90s, 1987, Fatal Attraction, of course. 1991, which is one of my favorites, and you think of it as just completely terrorizing, but Cape Fear.
Yeah. Just
the most terrifying ways of stalking an entire family. 1992, we had Single White Female.
Oh, that was great.
And Unlawful Entry. Another Ray Liotta classic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what our watch party's supposed to be, right?
Unlawful Entry?
Oh, no, not Ray Liotta. So Ray Liotta was the firefighter movie.
Yeah, the arsonist.
Color of Night was...
Oh, Color of Night with Bruce Willis. Yes.
Right. Okay.
That's our watch party.
Hey, we came full circle for once.
Yes.
And then my two personal favorites, 1993 brought us The Crush. So The Crush stars... it's our first real introduction to Alicia Silverstone. Before she was Cher, before she was the Aerosmith video girl.
Before she was Batgirl.
Before she was Batgirl, yes.
Ruined the franchise with Joel Schumacher.
And also starring Carrie Elwes, which, like, what a national treasure. He was just in Stranger Things. Like,
literally, he will do anything. I mean, he's a good actor, but he will do anything.
And I'm totally
he's Princess
okay
Bride.
with that.
I am too. He was in the only Saw I ever saw, because that was just torture porn. But that was the first one.
He was in Psych for a while. Anyway, so
and wasn't like he was the killer in Along Came a Spider.
Oh, yes.
Right? Remember? That was from that series of novels. And he was
the James
drugging
Patterson,
those women.
The Alex Cross series.
Yeah.
So 10 minutes into this movie, it's already like, what the fuck? How inappropriate is this in this day and age? So Alicia Silverstone plays this 14-year-old prodigy, sort of upper class girl, and her family rents out their back house to Carrie Elwes' character, who's just like this kind of, he's a reporter. He's a journalist. And this one's interesting because the young girl is the quote-unquote stalker. She takes a romantic interest in him. She's always kind of like popping into the back house and laying out in her bathing suit, playing loud music, so he's watching her. But like within the first 15 minutes, they're at some big party her parents are giving, and he's like, if you were 10 years older, and I was bleh, she's supposed to be 14.
It's gross.
But it gets pretty crazy. I mean, where she's breaking into his place, she's rewriting his articles for work. And then when he reprimands her about this stuff, she gets really sad and girlish and like, well, you're not going to like me anymore, pouty face. And it's just super creepy to watch. I mean, there's one scene where she kisses him. She's like sucking his fingers, and it's just super, super cringeworthy for, I don't know. Weren't you talking about
that's what I was going to say. Is like when you picked out that movie, I started reading articles on it, and there's this really great article written recently about. It's written by somebody that's like your generation. It's a male journalist or entertainment writer, and he remembers that being like a seminal movie when he was growing up. Like it was, really, really good, and he's like, oh, well, I'm going to sit down and watch this with my teenage daughter. And he had exactly the same idea, like 10 minutes in. He's like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But the great thing was that his teenage daughter turned to him and went, okay, this is completely messed up, but we have to finish it.
Right. Let's see what happens.
She was mature enough to understand that this was completely inappropriate.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting because it highlights the perceived maturity and sexual maturity of adolescent girls. When, lots of guys get in trouble for having sex with teenage girls, and it's always she looked older, she was more mature, and it's
she was flirting with me.
Yeah, it's like, this is a frickin' child.
Yeah.
At the end of this, Alicia Silverstone ends up in a frickin' funny farm, and, there's this whole big scene at the end, of course, but I think it's and that's really fucked up. It is
too,
totally
because,
fucked up.
Let's say if we were going to take this premise seriously, that this child, for me as a forensic psychologist doing an evaluation on a child that is acting in that manner, I would immediately go hypersexuality, over-sexualized. What has happened to this child?
Totally.
We have got to figure out who is abusing her. Now, obviously, there are some people that are so characterologically disordered that they could be budding sociopaths at age 14. That's a possibility. Right. But generally, the vast majority of them are people who have been perpetrated upon.
Yeah. But it kind of, I feel like this movie is the epitome of my theory that teenage girls are the most powerful people on the planet. They just don't know it usually. Yeah. When you think of all the men that get in trouble for having sex with teenage girls, they're quite powerful beings, actually.
Yes, they have so much power.
So my personal favorite, 1996, my best friend and I, graduating high school, we went and saw this movie together, is Fear with Mark Wahlberg and Reese Witherspoon. And I'm watching these movies and I'm like, I had that hair. I had those eyebrows. Like, this was me. It was so weird I think that's why they're so imprinted with me, is because I was the same age as these girls.
Yeah.
And
also, by the way, can I just say, like, total fan here?
Yeah.
Reese Witherspoon is a freaking phenomenal actress and has been since day one. If you go back and look at her in, what was the Dangerous Liaisons, the teen version with Sarah Michelle Gellar, but it was called...
shit.
Selma Blair, Ryan Philippe.
I know, everyone's screaming it right now.
But she's the one that, I mean, she elevates. I mean, Mark Wahlberg, totally nice guy. My partner just worked with him in a movie. He's a great guy. Not the most talented actor, and he knows it.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
But she elevated that. Everybody knows.
Oh, yeah. And she's absolutely. She just transcends generations. But it's pure 90s gold. It was so good. I mean, both of these movies take place in Seattle, so it's like grunge. You know, the soundtrack to Fear is awesome. It has like Bush and like just it's totally like Shiloh in her late high school, early college years. So, I mean, nobody was simultaneously as hot and creepy as Mark Wahlberg is in this film. It's funny. There's been so I threw up a teaser on our social media about like these films and what we were talking about. And if you're a teenage girl that watched this movie, the roller coaster scene is just burned into your brain, and that's all I'm going to say. Right. That was probably like one of the hottest things we'd ever seen, next to, you know, Marky Mark's Good Vibrations videos.
But, you know, in all seriousness, one of the things I think is fascinating about that particular scene, and, you know, and I don't give the writer credit for this at all, because I doubt they understood this psychological underpinning, is the idea that a sociopath is so impaired in their ability to feel stimulation.
Yeah.
Because of, you know, brain structure and amygdala structure, that engaging in the sex act while on a roller coaster was actually necessary for him to feel anything. Right. And what he wants to do is bring somebody along with him on that. I mean, he certainly has a motive for it, but it's also for him to feel something, because he's somebody that has an impaired ability to do that. Yeah.
So this is a classic story of like good girl falls for the bad guy, and her naughty sort of best friend is Alyssa Milano, and that's how she sort of, you know, ends up with this bad boy who, you know, turns out to be really sweet and not what she thought he was going to be, and tells her all the right things immediately, and starts manipulating her family immediately. That's really the sort of the creepiness to this. And then,
well, yeah, because that destroys your sense of safety. You want the parents to be the ones that actually have enough smarts to protect their child, right?
Right. And then there's just one big outburst of violence where he thinks her guy friend, he sees them talking and sort of like, you know, sweet touch on the shoulder or hug or something, and he just like pummels this guy. And she does the right thing. She absolutely says, never talk to me again, cuts off all ties with him, tells her family, like, I don't want to take his calls, all of that. And that's really when the obsession begins, because he's been rejected, can't have her. Thank you, Cruel Intentions.
Cruel Intentions. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Justin.
So the stalking behaviors are really prevalent. I mean, the surveillance, he's following at school. He gets into the school, leaves a note in her locker begging forgiveness, sends her flowers and takes pictures that they took together and sending them to her house, and then shows up unexpectedly and begs forgiveness. And she, you know, promises he'll change, and then she takes him back, of course. And then some of the sociopathic...
So, by the way, if you take away nothing from this episode, if you have been engaged in a violently coercive relationship with someone that has been that invasive, they are not going to change. Like,
there you go.
They're just not.
Right.
Like, that's actually the truth of what we're talking about.
Yes. So they get back together, but he now starts really a lot of the sociopathic stuff where he's turning her against her father. He fakes an assault by the dad and gets more and more obsessed. The phrase that pops into people's minds if they know this movie well is Nicole Forever, because he carved that into his chest and then did like a homemade tattoo. And it's literally like Nicole, the number 4, EVA.
Oh, wow.
But this movie is good. It's way better than The Crush.
Say hello to your mother.
Say hello to your
Remember
mother
that
for me.
SNL skit?
Yes.
I have to love him for sending himself up for that.
Totally. But there's just a ton of great movies. These are my personal favorites, and were sort of fun to go back and watch again. And just definitely tales of caution.
Okay, so can I give 2 more from the
please.
Not even from the 90s, but sort of that area. The first one that comes up that I love, and I don't want to love it as much as I do, but because there are some things that are really bad about it, except that Billy Campbell is such a phenomenal actor. The movie Enough with Jennifer Lopez, where she's like sort of a lower SES woman that marries this unbelievably hot, and that's a handsome guy right there. Charming, super successful, and it all starts going bad, and then he sets her up and sends her to prison. And of course, this is when it turns into a Lifetime movie,
right,
of where she's actually educated by another female inmate. Like, he's going to kill you. When you get out, he will go after you. And did she go to prison?
I don't know.
I may be.
Was that Double Jeopardy?
No, I may be confusing. There was one with Crystal Bernard that was on Lifetime, where she went to prison and was taught to defend herself.
She tries to run away, and that fails, and then it's.
So she ends up like
she learns like the only way to deal with it is to kill him.
So she trains. She becomes like a great fighter. But I mean, the way he plays, just not respecting boundaries, and and that really so plays sort of the antisocial, what we call it, the narcopath, which is not an official term, but a combination of narcissistic and sociopath, is really interesting. And then there's another one from your time period that we're talking about with Julia Roberts, which is, what is that?
Sleeping with the Enemy.
Sleeping with the Enemy.
Yeah,
and that is really. We're someone that is, engaged in coercive control. Every little mistake, he isolates her from her family. And when she finally makes her escape, he finds a way to track her down.
How creepy is this? I had a movie poster of that in my room in junior high. But because I loved it, and I loved, Julia Roberts was everything back then, but that's really weird. All right. I think that's enough.
That's
We're
lot.
melting. Our brains are melting right now.
That was fun, though. That was like a really cool episode.
Yeah. So, like we said, we do have, we're going to release our True Crime Podcast Festival live show about Mary Kay Letourneau that we have re-recorded with Getting Off. So what we're likely going to do is part 1 will be released through the Getting Off show. We'll let you know about that and when that comes out. And then part 2 will be released with us at LA Not So Confidential. Yeah. So look forward to that after this one.
One of the things, we're actually completely excited about our collaboration with Nick and Jessa. So one of the things I would want to say about, if there are cases that you would really like to know about a collaboration between the law, the defense attorney perspective versus the forensic site perspective, send us your ideas and your questions.
Sure.
We love working with them, and I think we're looking forward to a long collaborative relationship. I'm very excited about that.
And if we can do another live show in the future, we need to. I'm a jackass. I forgot to pick the winner of the t-shirt for podcast reviews, so we'll do that and announce it on social media.
Oh, cool. Okay. And our winners that we got from the podcast festival, Chris Brewer and Allison. Oh, I'm blanking. I'm so sorry. I'm melting. Your t-shirt's in the mail, I promise you.
All right. Till next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.